Hey Jenna, so I wanted to go over the 4 strategies with you for multiplying fractions. So when we start by multiplying a fraction by a fraction, that's where we are taking a part of a part. So we're having half of something and we're cutting it into 3/4. I think we started to work on this before you got sick, but I wanted to show you the model for this. The model for this looks like, it's called a Brownie Pan Model. And we start off by starting with the part that we have left. So we're taking half of 3/4. So we're starting out with 3/4 and then cutting it in half. So if I modeled 3/4, 3/4 of my model shaded in would look like this. So I have 1, 2, 3/4 shaded in, and if I cut that in half going across and I take half of what's in the brownie pan, that's 1, 2, 3 pieces out of 8 in the whole pan. So we practiced these models over and over again, and we came to find out that every single time, if you just multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator, you got the same answer as you did if you drew it out in a picture. So we figured out the algorithm would be numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. So if you apply that rule, 1 times 3 is 3, 2 times 4 is 4. So as I'm looking at this, I can see how blurry my screen looks. I'm going to try and clean off my camera lens. I'm going to pause for just a second and I'll be back in after I clean the lens. Alright, I'm not sure if this looks any better or not, but we're going to move on. We're going to move on to a whole number times a fraction. So if we take a whole number like 5 and we want to multiply it times 2/3, what we're really saying is that we want 5 groups of 2/3. So 5 groups of 2/3 would look like 2/3 and another 2/3. That's 2 groups of 2/3. And another 2/3. That's 1, 2, 3 groups of 2/3. So 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, 4 groups, 5 groups of 2/3. If I put all those thirds together, I end up with 10/3. So after writing this out a few times, you realize that the shortcut for all this adding is multiplication. So if, again, you take the whole number and write it as a fraction over 1, so that's 5 wholes, and 2/3, if we're multiplying it by 2/3, again, we can do numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, and end up with 10/3. So this is our problem written out all the way in expanded form. This is our shortcut for multiplication. Up here we're going to do a mixed number times a mixed number. So let's say we have 3.5 times 2 1/4. In this case, you have to multiply the 3 times 2 and the 3 times 1/4, as well as the half times 2 and the half times 1/4. So there's a lot of steps in this problem. In order to keep track of all of our steps, I chose to do that in a box model, just like we would if we were multiplying 2-digit whole numbers. So I made my 4-part box. I started with my 3.5 on the top and my 2 1/4 on the side. And then I just multiplied through as if I were doing the regular box method of multiplication that you learned in elementary school. So 2 times 3 is 6 wholes. And 2 times 1/2 is 1 whole, because that's 2 groups of 1/2. 3 groups of 1/4 is 3/4. And 1/4 times 1/2 is again just a fraction times a fraction, numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. 1 times 1 is 1, and 4 times 2 is 8. Now we have all the parts of our box, and just like the regular algorithm, we have to add up all those parts. Well, so far the whole numbers are easy peasy. 6 plus 1 is 7. And then we have to add up our fractional parts. Remember, when we're adding fractions, we want to make sure that we have a common denominator. So my 3/4 I'm going to change into the form of eighths by multiplying by 2 over 2. 4 times 2 is 8, and 3 times 2 is 6. And then when I put my eighths together and I put my fractional pieces together, I get 6 plus 1 is 7 eighths. So there's my mixed number times mixed number strategy. If I wanted to do a mixed number times a fraction, let's say I had 6 1/3, and I wanted to multiply that by 3/4. Again, we have to multiply both parts of the mixed number by the fraction. We're going to multiply 6 times 3/4 and 1/3 times 3/4. So I'm going to use that box model again just to keep track of my steps. I'm going to put my mixed number on the top, 6 1/3, so I'm separating out the two parts that make up my mixed number, and I'm going to put my fraction on the side. If I have 6 groups of 3/4, that gives me 18/4, and 3/4 times 1/3 is 3/12. Okay, I have two parts of my box that I need to add up. Again, I want to find that common denominator. My common denominator is 12. I'm going to multiply 4 times 3 to make my equivalent fraction, so I'm going to multiply by 3 over 3. 4 times 3 makes 12, and 18 times 3, I'm not really sure. I'm going to do that math real quick. 8 times 3 is 24, carry the 2, 3, 54, I think. Yeah. So 54 twelfths plus 3 twelfths altogether gives me 57 twelfths. If I wanted to change that into a mixed number, I would see how many times 12 goes into 57, and it looks like it goes in 4 times, because 4 times 12 is 48. So then 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57. That leaves me with a remainder of 9 twelfths. So 4 and 9 twelfths would be my mixed number. Hopefully this helps you with your multiplication strategies.